Hey guys, this is BB Games here, and it's been a while since I've done a video that wasn't purposely stupid, and even longer since my last Versus video, Ocarina of Time vs Majora's Mask. But I'm back. If you haven't watched one of my Versus videos before, then don't bother going back and watching my other two because my goal is to improve upon those videos significantly. In the Versus videos, I usually compare two games that I think are somewhat similar and say which one I like the best at the end. But I'm changing up the formula a bit for this one. I'll still be comparing two games, but I won't be splitting the video into sections based on gameplay, story, etc. like I did with the last Versus videos. And I'm also doing away with the point system, because the way that I added the same amount of points for each section was a bit flawed. Certain sections are more important than others depending on the game that you play, and my old point system didn't factor that in. The point system also made this seem like some sort of contest, and that isn't what this is. It's more of an analyzation of two of my favorite games of all time than it is a contest. If this video makes you angry, then I honestly don't care, but it is my intent to do so, as I am not an expert on game design, and this is not the objective truth about these games. That being said, I've chosen to compare Super Metroid and Metroid Prime for my first video back, because I'm fascinated by how similar the two games are despite the obvious difference of 2D and 3D. Before you watch the rest of the video, I'm assuming they have a basic knowledge of the Metroid series, so I don't have to waste time explaining it to you. If not, then I'm sure you could find something about it on the internet because you're a smart person. Also, I'll be talking about things that happen throughout the entirety of both games, so you should probably play them before watching this video. But anyways, no more delaying, let's start the video. I love how cleverly the plot is integrated into each game. Super Metroid's plot was minimal. The only plot that is mandatory is a couple of slides that show you what happened in the previous games, and also tell you that there's been a distress signal from the ship that is holding the last Metroid. Then you're sent right to the ship where the distress signal came from into gameplay. Here, without any text, it is revealed to you that all of the scientists on board are dead and that something awful has happened. This gives the player a sense of loneliness that sticks around for the rest of the game because you have no contact with any other friendly beings from here on out. A feeling that is a big part of what makes the Metroid's game special and something that Metroid Prime also has. After some walking, you come across Ridley, who is the first fight in the game. You can't kill Ridley, but this battle plays a purpose. Obviously, it helps teach you basic gameplay mechanics, but it also makes you feel weak and vulnerable, opening up a chance for progression of the player's strength as the game goes along. Not only that, but it furthers the plot, because it shows Ridley taking the Metroid to planet Zebes, giving you an incentive to continue. No more plot is given to you, but no more plot is needed. You're now free to explore a new world without being forced to read a bunch of plot dialogue. Metroid Prime takes a similar approach to the plot in that it keeps it to a minimum. The start of the game tells you that there's been a distress signal from the frigate, paralleling the beginning of Super Metroid. The rest of the plot is up to you to find with your newly equipped scan visor. The scan visor is used to acquire information. Every creature in the game has a unique description, making the game more immersive, while also telling you the creature's weak point. A nice touch that I've always enjoyed in the Frigid Orpheon sequence is that it describes exactly how each space pirate is injured, which, coupled with the ominous music, the creepy crawly parasites, and whatever this thing is, gave me the heebie-jeebies and still kind of does. The main reason that I brought up the scan visor, however, was that it serves as a way to uncover the plot through the cleverly hidden Chozo lores. I'm not going to explain the plot to you because that would take too long, but I will say that I'm a big fan of it. You can also find the plot in the perspective of the space pirates by scanning various computers that contain pirate data, which is a nice touch. The bottom line is, just like in Super Metroid, you're not bombarded by text that tells you what's going on. You can choose to uncover it yourself by being more observant of the game's environment. Metroid Prime also starts you in a state of weakness, only instead of accomplishing this by putting you against an unbeatable adversary, they take away almost all of the items that you have in the opening sequence of the game, making you feel almost even weaker than you do in Super Metroid. This annoys some people, but it's a choice that I'm personally a fan of because of how rewarding this progression is. You go from feeling handicapped in the beginning to almost unstoppable at the end of the game, specifically when you acquire the plasma beam. Other weapons blow your enemies up, but this one turns them into dust, including enemies that you couldn't even touch with your regular beams before. The best part is that it has unlimited ammo, though I think the end of Super Metroid tops this a bit. You get the plasma beam in that game as well, but it's overshadowed by the greatness of the screwball. With this, you can kill almost any enemy in one hit, just by jumping into them. This is insanely satisfying because you could breeze through areas that previously killed you with no trouble at all. Every item in each game is either fun to use or useful. This is something that is important when you consider how the game is designed. Both games frequently show you areas that you can't reach because you're lacking an item. This means that you'll have to go back to earlier areas when you have the correct items in order to progress through the game. This seems to be the most complained about aspect in each game because people don't like backtracking. But again, it's something that I like. Super Metroid and Metroid Prime feel more like cohesive worlds to me than levels because of their intelligent ways of hiding loading screens behind doors and elevators. So backtracking doesn't irk me like it does in other games. It feels less like I'm going back to World 1-1 in Super Mario Bros. And more like I'm reaching a previously undiscovered area. My point with the importance of items is that when paired with this style of game design, it makes me want to keep playing to discover what item comes next. Questions like what could await me in that door that I can't get to right now if I got this awesome weapon early in the game always roll through my head. And the answers to these questions almost never disappoint me. It instills a sense of wonder inside of me that few other games do. Isolation is a technique that is used to make this even more effective because it makes every new area tense. The need to discover what's lurking in the later parts of the game grows infinitely when you throw in the clever puzzles, the many hidden missile expansions and energy tanks that require you to have an understanding of every item and environment in the game, and the superb art design of the bosses and enemies. Speaking of art design, both games are timeless graphically, which seems to be a theme in Nintendo games. Super Metroid's graphics aging gracefully isn't all that surprising because well done 2D sprite work usually holds up. While Prime's graphics holding up is interesting because 3D games from the early 2000s generally look like garbage today. I think that this has to do with the fact that even though the game isn't completely stylized like Wind Waker, it isn't trying to look realistic. It looks like its own thing. The closest to realism that Prime strove for was the end of the game when Samus took her helmet off. And that looks horrible today, so that's what leads me to think this way. It's important to note that the weather effects seem to help as well, like the raindrops trickling down Samus's visor, the sun layer and the snow falling in the icy Phendrana drifts. Despite the graphics in Metroid Prime being more advanced than Super Metroid's, I think that I prefer the 2D graphics. This is probably due to the fact that I greatly prefer how the bosses look in Super Metroid. Sure, the Parasite Queen and Flagra creeped a second grade me out, but they don't hold a candle to the uncanniness of Phantoon, Dragon, and the Mother Brain. These bosses are uncomfortable to look at and I love it. And even though I don't think bosses like Rock Boy and Metroid Prime look necessarily weak, they don't hold up to the stronger designs of either game. It's important to note that the bosses don't just look pretty. Each game's bosses finds a creative way to test your ability to use items that you've just received. Like Rock Boy, who requires the thermal visor to scope out his weak point, or Crocmire, who is pushed back further into the pit of lava when you use the super missile. The final boss of Prime is the best example of this because it makes you use every beam that you've acquired in the game in order to beat it. Enemies are great as well, with my favorites being the She-Goths of Prime and the Alcoons of Super Metroid. The music is phenomenal for both games as well. Their soundtracks mostly consist of ambient tracks that aim to enhance the atmosphere of the experience, almost tying everything together. The hauntingly beautiful Brinstar Red Soil theme perfectly represents the loneliness and the mystery experienced early on in Super Metroid. The tense Lower Norfair theme acts as a perfect complement to what is one of the last areas of the game. It gets me hyped up while also letting me know that there's something sinister lurking in this area. I know that this theme was brought over to Metroid Prime as the Magmore Caverns theme, but Super Metroid's version of it always will be a bit more effective to me because of its placement near the end of the game. Prime's Phendrana Drifts theme perfectly captures the beauty of winter, and my favorite track out of both games, the Impact Crater theme, perfectly shows the last effort of a dying race to save their planet. I always find myself standing at the Impact Crater and looking up to see the rain dripping down my visor while this music plays. Now I do have some nitpicks for each game. Prime's hard mode to my knowledge only increases the health of enemies and bosses. I would have rather it changed their move patterns or change enemy placement because for a veteran player like me who has learned the enemy's patterns already, hard mode really only slows down the gameplay. As for Super Metroid, sometimes stopping to use the X-ray scope is annoying. I think that Prime's humming sound when you get near a hidden item is superior. I'm not quite sure if it was even possible to do this kind of thing on the Super Nintendo, so I'll give it a pass. The sand in Meridia gets on my nerves as well, as do most gameplay mechanics that hinder movement. These are just minor nitpicks though that don't really hurt either game all that much in the grand scheme of things, so don't get all fired up about them. If you've made it this far, you're probably wondering which of the two that I prefer. Honestly, I like them about equally. Both are about as close to perfect as a game could get. If you held a gun to my head and demanded that I chose one though, it would have to be Prime, just because it was a bit more impactful on me. being one of the first games that I had ever beat. It goes to show how well Super Metroid has stood the test of time, because I played it far after I had beaten Prime for the first time, and I liked it this much. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you have any feedback for this video, then just go ahead and leave a comment, because I'm probably a bit rusty at writing serious videos, because it's been such a long time. But anyways, goodbye guys.